Hey everybody, I'm Sean Wildstorm Robinson.
And I am Carson. I wasn't prepared to come up with a crazy name like that. Grubaugh. Welcome back to Living the Line Reacts. And we're going to pick up where we left off last week with a big cliffhanger.
How is Jim Lee going to draw a bad version of a panel and a good version of the panel at the behest of his I almost said at the behest of his editor, semi-editor, uh Stan
Overlord.
Lee, who is standing, I mean, what, like 6 inches away from him, leaning over the drawing desk as he's doing it? What will happen? What will he accomplish? What does a bad image look like? Let's go to the tape.
And Sean, I'll point out that you missed my cliffhanger joke. I
Oh.
bet Sean doesn't even know that.
Okay. Shit.
And one will be a Jim Lee type.
Actually, like we were talking earlier.
So what he's going to do, if you hadn't watched the previous video, is Stan has asked Jim to do the same panel once as a mediocre, acceptable journeyman version and one as a Jim Lee making it spicy version.
Right, with the implication at the same time that DC is the target of his criticism, by the way.
Yeah, and I mean, at the time, that was kind of the case, right? Like, the DC was pretty stiff and journeyman feeling, and Marvel was the exciting one.
Yeah, with a few exceptions like Perez and people, the guy who ended up doing all those Batman and Catwoman covers, who was a wild man.
Kelly Jones.
Yeah, Kelly Jones.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they had settled into a very, very tame house style.
Yeah.
All right, so let's find out.
It's a talk scene.
Unless they're you and me, of course.
Absolutely. In this one, it's going to be very clear what's happening and everything, but it's not a shot. It's not an artistically pleasing shot. This one I'm going to play around with and create a little more depth in it and play around with the mood and put those little extra things which make those panels better. Right. And actually, I picked this all up from the book you did with John Buscema, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. And,
Buscema, not Ramita. We got that wrong in one of the earlier videos.
And nothing real new here, but
it's fun to see it.
Okay, do your panel borders.
There's somebody who would be great to see draw sometime. Buscema is a beast.
Yeah. You're also known for...
I think isn't it him that there's a video of like him, Moebius, and Neil Adams all drawing together?
We'll watch that gosh.
All right. They're all drawing on a whiteboard.
Next week, folks.
Yeah. What am I not known for? All right. Okay, so let's say we got
for being in a bad mood, I think.
All right.
Now these are the two men talking.
Right. You got a cigar here.
Now it looks like he's standing. Is he leaning on a table?
He's leaning 6 inches away from me, Stan.
It's so small, it's just going to be...
And speaking of Moebius, he's got the feet on the panel border, which is not something Jim does a lot.
No, it's very interesting. This is a, yeah. I'm curious to see where he goes with this, but his attempt to stiffen it up is essentially making it look like a more traditional cartoonist, a non-superhero cartoonist.
And the stage play kind of idea of cartooning. Yeah. Flat side shot.
Flat plane. Yeah.
You're kind of a closed composition, everything like The Office is the room.
Right.
Is the panel border, basically.
Yeah.
Fine. So we're really talking layout. We're going to see a good layout and a bad layout. Or inadequate layout.
Right. Well, this isn't awful. It certainly tells what's going on. It's very clear and everything.
It's like Tintin.
You might even want to do a panel like this to start with, to establish a scene. I just, I wouldn't do a whole story.
Quietly.
Right. I wouldn't do a whole story at this depth, which is a medium shot.
And this is, like a lot of cartoonists these days kind of work in this mode as well. Like, this is very drawn in quarterly to me. Like a lot of the artists they publish that have this more, I call it functional cartooning, and it's clear storytelling, and you'll have like a whole 2-page sequence where you just have this with the characters slightly moving around. And I always kind of debate whether, which I like more. Sometimes what he's about to do, I'm sure, seems a little more excessive to me.
Yeah, like a Guy DeSiel has made an entire career drawing nothing but the shot that he's talking about as the functional, adequate thing right now. And many other cartoonists exactly like that. And when superhero cartoonists do tackle real world things, they sometimes seem as though everybody's screaming at you about it all the time, you know, which can, you know, is what makes some of those rather extreme ones fairly wild. You know, Neil Adams doing a comic about drugs or whatever, and you forget for temporarily you're in a superhero comic, but somebody's like, oh, you know.
And I'm curious to see, like, I'm kind of suspicious that I'm gonna like this composition more.
Let's find out.
Because he is so classically trained, this is gonna be the more like that really solid classical, like Alex Toth type of thing, where everything's on vertical and horizontals, or Alex Raymond type of thing. You know, I kind of like that style a lot of the time.
At this kind of angle, which is straight on, but whatever.
Well, now I'm going to tell you something. I find that when an artist is really as good and as adept as you, it is very difficult to draw something that isn't good. Because even though you're considering this fairly simple and uninteresting, I mean, that's really a beautiful layout, you know? It's concise.
Dan.
It's well balanced. But all right, now let's see how you're going to do to make it exciting.
He put that wall in there immediately. Immediately compensated for that extra space happening on the left. It was very interesting how that just shifted the weight and pulled it all together into a perfectly balanced composition.
That's what he said. Like, you can't do it wrong. Like, I was thinking all he needs to do is slap a window behind that guy. And
I was thinking a picture. That's funny.
Yeah, just a rectangle right there, and you don't even need any other perspective. You can have that very flat graphic, really successful. Yeah,
a cat just hanging there, baby. Cat on the wall.
Any rectangle, any rectangle.
Right. I guess basically his boss is bawling him out.
Yeah.
And from the gestures,
he's basically drawing Stan beating up his ass right now. The psychology of these is fascinating.
I don't get that. You might have written that the fat boss is bawling out his underling here.
We're standing like this.
Right, and this adequately takes it.
Yeah.
Tells the story, but it doesn't convey some of the emotion.
Okay, odds that he draws a Stanley mustache on the close-up of the face.
Okay, so a legend of the industry who your financial worth is dependent upon is bawling you.
Stuff that you want to carry through in your story. So in this one, I'm going to have the boss in the foreground. He's going to be much larger in the image, and he's going to be leaning in on the guy.
The baller is going to be much bigger than the ballie.
Right.
And the editor knew what Jim was saying and tipped that in at the exact right moment.
You see, I like to do a lot of stuff where I'm looking right behind the shoulder kind of thing.
Right. You don't
this is a very good technique.
Yeah.
Cross the shoulder.
Now this is going to be a Jim Lee bawling out.
Oh, he's got a cigar.
Pain of that guy who's being bawled out, right?
Give him the stash.
Right.
And of course, he's got a cigar with a lot of smoke coming out.
I don't know if when you're writing and stuff, whether you like sound out the sound effects or whatever. Because like when I'm drawing, you know, whatever. And I always make the grimace of the character. So when I'm drawing,
absolutely, make even though I'm not drawing it, I'm making face. My wife comes in all the time and says, "What's happening in here?" She hears the noises.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, and then he's got
to have some storyboarding experience, like formal, like video, you know, storyboarding. Well, or this just similar solutions to the same thing.
Yeah,
Sorry.
This all just feels like there's a certain, like those Loomis books, like the Loomis books on composition and looking at the Alex Toth successful panels, and
And this guy, to show that he's being flustered here, I'll have him reach in on his collar there. So he's got his finger in here.
Nice. That's a subtle one.
Very tight, all of us.
It's getting tight. He feels
not wiping sweat.
Absolutely. You know? The smoke is all over the place. And
that smoke is another little bit of your little shorthand.
Yeah, just the bad breath of this guy leaning in on him.
Now play with it and let it trail around like it's a living thing here. Because usually smoke just goes straight up. It's pretty boring. But you can take a license. You can take license with it and go, oh, okay, it's going to snake around like this.
Oh.
These are fantastic in sequence. I mean, each of these are successful in their own right. Using them in sequence would be incredibly effective.
Yeah. There's no reason to choose one or the other.
Body back a little bit like that to show that he's moving away from the guy. And hot guy with glasses and.
Oh, he
I
gets
with
the mustache.
I think actually it must be clear and plain to anybody that this kind, and there's your shorthand again.
Right.
That this kind of a layout certainly has more emotion, it has more drama, and it's more eye-catching.
Right.
Drama, definitely.
I must admit,
You like that one? Well, maybe I'm
nice.
doing it wrong. I don't know. You know, take all this stuff with a grain of salt.
No, but it was a good example.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, because we've only got about 5 minutes more tape
Really?
left.
Wow. Okay.
Is there anything you yourself, without me butting in, is there anything you'd like to draw? Anything you'd like to show us?
Let me do like a more finished piece.
So what do you like? Let's go back to this real quick. What do you think about the two compositions?
Well, damn, man. I mean, I'm actually, like you said before, I'm not crazy about this little bit of actual perspective that he injected into the left there. I think that was like a visual mistake that just back into his own tics. But I mean, like I said, Ergay has had an entire career using nothing but medium shots with people standing on the bottom of the panels. I mean, this is essentially like Ergay without an establishing shot right there. And it tells the story cleanly and efficiently and kind of gets you that sort of like kid love of comics where you realize, oh, hey, it's like little people moving around on the page for me and I can help them, move around. You don't get that when everything is a cinematic, like, cross the shoulder from the bird's eye view as it poops on somebody walking by, a worm inside of a dustbin. You know what I mean? All that stuff is like, it can be kind of noisy.
Yeah. And I think like really, I mean, that's how he draws. And that's why we all like responded to it as children, is because everything was all loaded all the time. Right. But I do think, imagine that you have like this same kind of panel here, like 6 panels overall. Right. And this is in the middle. Then that becomes extremely impactful. Like whatever's going on in the conversation is pretty benign until this moment, and then you go on to these. And I do think it's really interesting. He's such a good artist. He can't make a bad composition, and he also, like you said, they work real well in sequence. So that they work together as like, this is the top of the page, we lead the eye over, and now we're going down to this panel too. Like he can't help but plan out these directional forces in the piece that are boom, boom. And I just think that's really interesting as well. Like when you're so good, then Stan said it too, like you can't help but be good. You can't, like, it's like when an actor can pretend that they're a bad actor. That always impresses me.
A little rough.
Okay, go ahead. In 5 minutes.
So Jim's not a good enough artist to pretend that he's a bad artist.
I'm not trying to put pressure on you,
Nah,
this grip, I can't let go of this. This is very, very nice.
Yeah. And it's only in the noise stage.
Yep.
He's like giving up some control on purpose.
Yep. Using the side of the pencil so he gets a more thick application, sort of like you would have if you were using Vine charcoal or something like that. You know, much lighter, obviously, but like the the blunter instrument providing that sort of noisy cloud that he's going to use to scry out the finished image.
Versus when we were looking at Tezuka, and I was so astonished at how thick he drew, but that's because he has that cartooning vocabulary where he's pretty much doing a finished drawing right from the gate, and so he can afford that.
The drawing in 60 seconds, but
make a good drawing.
Got to do this first.
3 3/4 minutes.
No pressure, says Stan.
Well, most every artist does that, I guess, right? You rough it in very lightly.
People go to very elaborate measures to make sure that the drawing will fit in the space. They'll do even tighter stuff than this. Okay.
Not when they only have 3 minutes left.
No, absolutely.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah, I'm using my time to reply to you right now.
Hair that is sort of a trademark that I put right between them.
So I asked him what he wanted to draw, and he said "sexy lady."
While you're drawing, if it doesn't throw you off, and I know
I want to draw someone for my new creator-owned series, Wildcats.
Yeah. Let me talk about that.
Do you do a day or panels or however you'd want to classify it?
I'll typically do like 1 page a day.
Really?
I can do more.
And is that pencil and ink?
No, just pencil.
Pencil. One page of pencil. But of course, as elaborate as you make each panel, I can understand why it would be one day. But one a day, the way you draw, that's quite a lot.
It is.
Yeah. Do you think this is going to turn into voodoo from Wildcats?
It sure looks like it.
Yeah.
I mean, are we going to get pre-sentiments of every single one of their creator-owned properties?
I hope so. We're going to.
He seems like a physical guy. Look at the way he's bearing down on this. He's got some kind of athletic background. Here is my guess. Just the knees up, just a complete, full body experience. Same thing when he was doing those large motions. He's got an ergonomic routine that is actually like integrated into his drawing. It's good. It's really great to see.
Looks pretty buff right there.
Long day?
Typically.
Don't stop to scratch your lip.
Right.
It's now 2.5 minutes.
Okay.
You can scratch your lip when they're finished. How long a day do you put in?
I'd say I put in like 10 to 14 hours. And
really?
Yeah, 6 days a week.
Jesus.
Like I said, it's labor intensive. You're just drawing so much stuff. It's not just cars and not just people. You got to draw buildings and people and.
Yeah.
No, not
well,
voodoo.
Of course, if you put in maybe.
And yet he can spit this stuff out so quick. I mean, if he was working in a more economic style, a more efficient style, I mean, you could imagine like Jim Lee, stomping the hell out of Adrian Tomine in a drawn and quarterly slice of life off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, with the type of composition he produced earlier.
Right.
So quick.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, you have that quick cartooning style. Yeah, he could turn out a book a day.
I mean,
I'd have sold 9 million copies.
Well, it's definitely worth it. I mean, it's a real kick. It's a terrific job. I'd advise it for anybody that.
Well, you seem very happy with it. And you seem somehow very relaxed and very easygoing. I figured a guy like you would be incredibly temperamental. There'd be no way I could talk to you. You'd be saying, "Shut up, Lee, this is my show and I'm going to do it." But I've been able to browbeat you, been rotten to you, and it's
He's just like lauding it over him. I own you.
He's a charmer. He can't resist giving both sides,
Nah, he's abusive, manipulative.
I didn't get any sleep last night.
Neither did I. Is this any special girl?
No, I'm just making it up as I go along. I didn't even realize she was going to be like a party dress until I said, "Okay, well, there you go."
I guess I was talking to you and you were almost drawing unconsciously.
Right. I do when I'm talking on the phone with people. I doodle little things and nothing.
Do you sketch all the time? I mean, even when you're not
just
doing
doodles.
The
I rarely do finish work outside of the work I do in comics. That's like real work, to take a drawing that you just kind of toyed with and take it to completion,
I just told you I draw 14 hours a day. When am I sketching?
Do you always draw with broken lines, sort of like that? There's a space there and there's a little space. Does that give you a feeling of more looseness? Or?
The older style would be a fluid line all over the place. A lot of more, the younger artists will break it up. Simply because the same way people play with line weights, like this line will be thicker here and lighter up here, you can take it to the extreme where it vanishes.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Right, so it's like
gotten so thin that you don't see it.
Right. And
keep drawing.
Okay, right.
So, Raymond,
you're one of these guys that can't draw and chew gum at the same time, right?
Sometimes.
We're going to finish it. We still have 2 minutes.
Right. Okay.
My gosh,
this flow here is great.
Heroin.
Yeah.
Right. Or villain.
The compositional use of things like that. I mentioned it before, but like directionality, especially like something has moved in space prior to that. This is not what's happening here. But a really, really good use of any kind of flowing object like that as a trail, the history of the motion.
Yeah, and a good awareness as he's going of like the negative, like he almost created a heart there, and just making sure every negative shape is interesting as well. Almost more interesting than the shapes on the figure.
A little holster here.
I guess she doesn't have a dress. Now she got
down to 1 minute, Jim.
1 minute. Okay. All right.
You see, you do have a flair for the dramatic. You're even making this last drawing dramatic. Will he make it or won't he make it?
These shadows there. That's very nice.
Yeah.
Some blacks here.
That sculptural quality again, so he can knock it back to 100%.
Yeah.
For pants, I suppose.
Yeah, I can tell that. think you're really enjoying this. You do like to draw, don't
Oh,
you?
yeah.
Well, and you wonder, like, when he's drawing this fast, what is taking him 14 hours, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And like when he was doing perspective, he wasn't using a ruler
No.
or anything. He could kind of bang that out pretty,
Mm-hmm.
just eyeballing it.
Well, between your psychology and your mime and your drawing and your articulateness, it has been really a pleasure talking to you, Jim. And I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I
No,
have.
definitely. It's been a pleasure.
And I've got to tell you that I think you've given concrete evidence why the name of our series is A Visit with the Comic Book Greats. I want to thank you very much for coming. It's been a great...
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, oh man. An intense experience there. I mean, obviously, besides the odd social situation that these gentlemen are in, I feel like I've downloaded a little piece of the Jim Lee mind there. But I do want to come back to that thing I mentioned in that first video that we did with this one, is that I think that success of any stripe can have a tendency to sort of freeze somebody in that state. And especially if you continue to work, and especially if you do such a labor intensive thing, that you can kind of just be frozen in like the success state, because that's the one that, you know, opened it up for you, and now you can do the things that you want to do. But those things are now sort of framed and delimited by the position that you found yourself in.
Yeah, and you kind of wonder, because he is like, the difference between the Liefeld video, which was the very intuitive, kind of instinctive approach that he had, versus Jim Lee being, like he said, analytical and articulate, and he would be a very good teacher, right? If Stan was, and we weren't interrupting and teaching for him, he would be a very good teacher. And it is a bit of a shame, like you're hinting at, to see someone like that not have the time to slow down to rethink what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, you're always pressing forward, so you're just on autopilot.
Of course, I'm holding him to a higher standard than I do some of the other cartoonists that I think about as you know, greats. I mean, you know, Mitsuru Adachi basically draws the exact same way that he did in 1982 now. But then again, Mitsuru Adachi is a storyteller and a writer. And the stories that he's telling are what he's communicating with his art. So, I mean, I don't know if it's quite so much of a loss if somebody like him freezes the state that they're in, because he's the package, you know what I mean? He's the stories that he's communicating are more than adequately communicated by what he can do. So,
but you feel like Jim Lee as more of a visual person,
right?
See, I think though, when I hear guys like him interviewed, or listening to Greg Capullo talk to Mark Miller, artists like that are the highest level in the mainstream comics superhero industry, they always talk about, or Brian Hitch is another guy I was just listening to recently, they always talk about storytelling first. Like, that's what a professional is. And even though they're doing all of this dynamic stuff, that's really what they're focused on as well. And so it does seem like the stylistic changes that they make are more limited, because they're kind of thinking about, look, I'm not here to be the greatest illustrator in the world. I'm here to put out a book a month and tell a story clearly and effectively. And so I think it probably actually is comparable. I know they're not the writers in the same way Adachi would be, but I think in their mind, that's the job. And me and you tend to come to these things more from like comics as artistic medium, that we want to see evolution in the medium. And I just think it's a value set difference also. Like, he seems to want to play with different media and stuff. He'll play with watercolor and washes and things, but I think he does think of himself as a storyteller. It's just his value in storytelling is dynamism,
right,
overall. And so that's kind of the approach that he sticks with.
Yeah, that's a very instructive. I was reminded when we were reflecting on the good panel and bad panel, I was reminded of the brief attempt at a autobiographical comic that Jack Kirby made, which is quite exciting. Because it is drawn exactly how he drew his superhero comics. You know, Kirby was actually capable of a quieter style. I mean, as you found in the, you know, the romance work that he did. But he didn't draw this particular thing in that quiet style. And it's very interesting seeing scenes from his childhood with his mother and people cooking and things like that. But like loud, you know. It's not bad. I'm not knocking it. It's just the volume is all the way up, you know.
Strange.
Yeah,
We'll have to try and get a hold of that, and because I would like to see that. I'm not someone who I like Kirby more as I get older, but I'm not someone who sits around and worships him. But that sounds really interesting.
Yeah,
and after you saying like it would be interesting, you know, that he could put Adrian Tomine, I don't know how you say his last name, to the test, it would be really fun just to see Jim Lee like I'm gonna drop the dynamism and just be a classic composer, because he can obviously do that very well.
I picked out Adrian Tomine, by the way, because he is I think the exemplar of the, let's call it the drawn and quarterly like literary style, and where it's all clean presentation, but also can draw. He's choosing to work that way. Adrian Tomine is not limited by his skill set. He is choosing to panel things in a certain sense so that you are experiencing them in a moment to moment kind of like, this is what's happening now, rather than this is how we are viewing this thing. So he's somebody that has a lot of drawing ability, but is filtering everything through his sense of what the storytelling beats should look like.
Yeah, he just has a different like directorial taste. He's like Wes Anderson versus Jim Lee being Michael Bay, you know, like
sure, yeah, absolutely.
Kind of headed towards different comparison. Audiences. But to see that Jim Lee probably does have the chops to be the Wes Anderson, it would be really interesting to see him do that for just once. And it would be equally, it would be interesting to see Adrian Tomine go the other way.
Yeah.
I think Dan Clowes is someone who's done that, where he'll have the more down-to-earth styles, and then he'll do one that's more like sci-fi or superhero.
Yeah.
And you do see the limitations on him. Like the one I was reading, what's that called? It's right
Death Ray.
No, Patience, because Patience is like a weird time travel story. There's some scenes in there that almost look like a Michael Allred page, but they're just not as good, and Allred like kills it. And so it'd be interesting to see Allred try to not do that and do the down to earth stuff, and see if they fail or not.
I specifically didn't pick out Clowes because I think that Clowes is quite wisely working within his own existing limitations. And because I think that he sort of settles into something that looks very good for what he does. You know what I mean? Like he prunes the things that aren't functioning for him, and that's sort of the derivative of his style. Obviously, it's more, you know, it's more than that, but that's, you know, I don't think Tomine is limited in quite the same way.
But it's actually a really interesting question, because I think a lot of people think Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, those guys that do the extreme action stuff, they're kind of like almost written off as artistic talents by the people who take comics more as a serious art form. But I actually bet that they would do a better job of maybe not Liefeld, but Jim Lee would do a better job of the down to earth than a lot of the down to earth people would do at the Dynamics. That was another reason I kind of left the idea of comics as a career, is because I had a visualization limitation that stopped me from doing the really dynamic stuff. And I think those guys probably have both, and it would be really interesting to see that competition, because this video highlighted that for us, that they could maybe outdo the guys that kind of poo-poo them.
I think so.
They're just smart enough to chase the money because they can't. So,
and while there's still money in comics somewhere to be had, you know, the good for them for doing it. So if you are managing to make money that you can live off of in comics, you are accomplishing quite the feat in 2023.
As Sean is learning over the last
No, we're doing our best. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I hope this has been enjoyable for you. We'll try to hit a few shorter ones in the near future here. And you'll be able to tell whether we've actually switched days by whether I'm still wearing a black shirt.
Or whether your nipples are more or less chafed next time you pull your shirt up.
Where do you think my... Yeah. I don't know where you think they're located, but
they're right under the clavicle, right? Isn't that's what I learned from comics.
That's what I learned from Bridgman's Anatomy.
Yeah, for sure. All right, later, guys.
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.
House on Fire by Matt Battaglia is a just gorgeous book where Matt's kind of making an emotional response to the years of COVID and wrapping that into a sci-fi dystopian future that really the sci-fi dystopian's backgrounded, and you're focused on the emotional journey of two characters in a really beautiful way. And then that's enhanced by Matt's like really awesome, loose, kind of Paul Popish dry brush work. And then Sean and Matt have worked to get this second kind of orange spot color in there that's going to look really, really beautiful, and has allowed Matt to use his dry brush technique to add tone to the thing too. So with Sean's production technique, this is going to be a gorgeous book with a lot of heart.